Good afternoon, and today I am thrilled to welcome back my lovely AJ, also known as Tony Fordham. Hello, Tony. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Hi, Donna. Yeah, Tony Forder, and I stick a J in the middle when I'm writing. Um, yeah, so I'm a crime and thriller writer, mostly focusing on the crime element at the moment. And yeah, I've been doing this now full time for, I don't know, maybe 4 years, 5 years, something like that. And after spending a lot of time working in education in the IT area. So at the moment, things are not going too badly, though. I'll be very happy to see the end of 2023.
Yeah, won't be long.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're mostly here to talk about what isn't the Last Bliss book, but is the Last Bliss as a proper policeman, I guess, is
Yes.
the simplest way to put it. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Okay. So, yeah, a few years ago, I decided um, to write Bliss in real time, as it were. So he would grow older naturally rather than squeeze three cases into a year of his life. I would just have them going along as they should be, which has led to him reaching the age where he's reached retirement, basically compulsory retirement. He could have retired 10 years ago, but he's now reached compulsory retirement. So, in the latest book, What Dies Inside Us, it's essentially his last couple of weeks as a copper. And there are two cases that he faces. He already knows at this stage that he's winding down this part of his career to take on another role. And it's not a spoiler to say that, he's going to go on, he's going to stay with the police, but he'll no longer be an officer. He's just a member of staff. Um, so, this book in particular, over the last few, I've been gradually kind of slowing the pace somewhat, doing a little bit more procedure uh, to reach this point where there's a lot of retrospective stuff and introspection from him. He knows that he's reached the end of his career and he asks himself, have I done anything good? Have I done anything worthwhile? Um, and I think these two cases in particular um, give him the answer to that. And I think I'd always planned to do something with him at the end. I didn't want to just end at this point. But it took me a little while to figure out exactly where he was going to move on to from this point. But this book focuses on two cases which are probably shared pretty evenly across the book, which is unusual for me. I usually have one main case and a secondary storyline. This one, they're pretty much 50-50 on the page. Um, so one of them is a kind of murder mystery in the sense that he's called in to the office because um, a homeless man has come in and reported a murder. The only thing is the body's missing. And 2 days later, the homeless man is found murdered in the same spot. So that's the case that is the one that he's most focused on to begin with. He then learns of something else that's going on in kind of in the cuckooing world, and is particularly disturbed by what he learns about that case as well. So that case was originally intended to be a secondary storyline, but as I started writing it, I felt that it deserved more time on the page. So I had a lot going on in my head at the time because I wrote this one very differently. Normally, I sit down in the office and I write the book. This time, because I was unwell and I was mostly writing in bits and pieces, sitting in the living room, what I did was I wrote scenes. So as they came to me, I'd write a scene or a bit of dialogue. And I had a whole file full of all these bits and pieces. So I then eventually reached the point where I had to thread them all together. And as I did so, I did realize that actually I want to do more about this particular cuckooing case. And as I say, it ended up working out. Well, I think it worked out quite well, better than expected. Um, because I felt being more procedural, slightly more slow paced, and a little bit focused on Bliss coming to the end of his career. I didn't know that everyone would like it, but people seem to have.
And people seem to have, like, you've had the best reviews you've ever had that have been stunning. But I think that's a slight understatement, AJ.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can't speak for everybody, obviously, but the biggest surprise, I mean, I'm always kind of surprised. The big thing here is that I'm not usually I'm a big critic of my own work, and I can't really regard it as a reader would. But when I was finished with this one, I liked it. And I thought, well, that's got to be bad. If I like it, it's got to be bad. Um, and I thought, so I was anxious, um, and especially the fact that it was his last two cases as a police officer. I thought he might be held to a higher account, but no, it's worked out brilliantly. The reviews have been fantastic, and yeah, I couldn't have asked for more.
Because it's stunning, as you know, as I said at the time when I read it. Not I literally sat and just read it cover to cover after all those months of writing. But there we are. I was excited. What was I going to say? Oh, um, you have quite a big fan base, as you know. You have your Blissets,
Hmm.
and you have your own group. So do you feel more pressure now when you're writing, or do you still write it just for you?
Well, I write it still for me in the first place, um, but now with a kind of a nod and a wink to those who follow me. But there's greater expectations simply because with each book, you want to get better, you want to improve. And I felt that the series was improving. I then reached a point where I thought maybe it would plateau out, but when people say, "Well, this is the best book yet," you think, "Great! Oh, what am I going to do next time around?" There's more pressure on the next one. Then I don't ever expect to always better the last one because nobody does that. I've never read a single writer whose books always improve, especially in a long series. Um, I mean, my favorite author, Michael Connolly, his best Harry Bosch books were probably 20 years ago. He's still written brilliant stuff since, but you have a kind of a peak, I think. Um, and I thought I'd kind of reached that peak a few books ago with The Autumn Tree, but which made me anxious about the next ones, you know. Um, but in retrospect, when I look back on them, I'm pleased with the ones that have come since and extremely pleased with this last one. I felt when I finished it that it was my best all round book. Um, and so I couldn't be happier. But yeah, there is expectation. I mean, obviously, you want to please the people who are following you, but I don't write for them. You have to write for yourself first and foremost. Um, although, as I say, I'm a big critic of my work, and I don't please myself with my work. I have to start off that way, kind of thinking, this is for me. I need to write this book. It's in my head. I've got to get it out of my head. And then during the edits, I strive to make it the best book I can at the time. And then you just put it out there and you hope. But yeah, each book carries a little bit more weight going into it.
So I imagine you're feeling that right in the new one,
Well,
where
the new
it kicks
funny,
off.
Funny enough, the new one gives me a little bit of an advantage because it's going to be different. So because he's reached that point where he leaves the police force, and then comes back to work with the police as a member of staff, as in two jobs. As you know, he's going to be a civilian SIO, and he's also going to work cold cases. In some ways, it's like starting again. Only I have the advantage of people already knowing him and most of the characters. But I feel that gives me a little bit of leeway because I am changing things. Yeah, that comes with its own pressures because, it has to live up. And as far as I'm concerned, even though you can't always improve, I want it to be of the same standard. I want people to think, yeah, this fits in easily with the rest of the series. I don't want people to think, oh, I don't know, this is a change and I don't like it. There's always the risk of that.
Yeah.
But hopefully there's enough of, see, being a civilian SIO, as I've learned, really the only difference is that he doesn't have a warrant card, so he can't arrest people. But he can do everything else. And Bliss has always got a little bit more involved on the ground than he should do. And then as an SIO, he has to take a little bit more of a step back. But as I was chatting with Graham Bartlett at the beginning of the week, and as he said, Bliss is going to be Bliss. He's only a month out of the job. He's not suddenly going to come into this new role as a completely different character. So I've just got to write him as him and just reel myself in a little bit, which is why it's nice having the two different options, the active case and the cold case. And I'm just finished chapter 10 today. And yeah, so far I'm liking the mix. I'm enjoying that added little strand of having the cold case running.
Awesome. Does Graham read your books after he gives you advice, or does he just give you advice?
What was that again? Sorry?
Graham read your books.
I don't think I don't know. I'm not sure if he reads them or not. We've never really spoken about it.
I'll have to ask him.
I mean, he's yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, the fact if he hasn't mentioned it. He probably doesn't like him. Um,
Which I don't think he didn't.
Yeah, but I think yeah, he's obviously aware of what goes on because I talk to him one way or another about every book. There's always something in every book that I mean, in the last one, I spoke to him about the cuckooing side, and also the procedure when there's a murder reported but there's no body and that kind of thing. So I went over that kind of stuff with him. The previous one, we mainly focused on the use of firearms teams and that kind of stuff. But each of them are interesting, and each of them, I come to him at the point I come to him is where I've done my research and I think I know what I need to do, so that I limit my amount of time with him insofar as we don't have to sit there for hours and hours and hours and I've got to make copious notes. Basically, I'm saying, look, this is what I want to do. Is this the right way of thinking? And he goes over things, and he's always got other suggestions too, which you can just throw into the mix. The main thing is that what I'm doing is not outrageous. We all do a little bit more than we should. It's not perfectly procedural, but as long as it's feasible and mostly authentic, then I'm happy with that. But yeah, I don't know if he's ever read any of them.
Yeah, yeah, I might have to ask him.
I haven't asked, and Katie said, "Yeah, they're crap, mate."
I think he'd tell me. I'm not sure.
I don't know. He might not.
Yeah.
Not if he doesn't like them. He might not. I don't know. He gets so much stuff to read in all the
He
reviews.
read my books though, so although I was asking for help, I suppose. But
Yeah, I mean, I've never asked him to have a look at one of mine. I've never sent. I mean, sometimes I thought, I would have sent him one by now, but I'm a little bit afraid that he might actually read it.
You boys, honestly, it's such a nightmare. You've read his books, haven't you?
I read his first one. Yeah, yeah.
Honestly, boys, I don't know, or authors actually, it's not just boys. You're a nightmare.
Yeah, well, you only need sometimes you only need one. The trouble is when you know people, it's very hard, very difficult. If they if if you get to know them with them having read your stuff and liked it, that's one thing. But if you suddenly go, here's my book, please read it, mate, what are they going to say? Are they going to be honest and objective, or will they sort of pull back a bit? You don't know.
Yeah, it's a fair point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Luckily, you're an amazing writer. Graham's an amazing writer, so it's easy for me.
Well, we get on well when we chat, and I respect what he's done in the past and the sort of career he's trying to make for himself now, a secondary career, as I've done. Um, but yeah, it's going well for him. So
I know, it's so annoying. He's got like amazing kids, and he goes to these amazing holidays, and he does this amazing stuff, and it's just not fair. Like,
yeah, I know.
yes, and he writes great books as well. Like, seriously, man, need something for everyone. You as well.
Sorry.
Honestly, it's very annoying. He just laughs at me when I say that, though. He won't accept that he's a legend, but he is. Like,
Well, he's as I say, I rely on him to get things right as much as possible. Any errors are mine, not his.
yeah.
Yeah.
Are you conscious when you're writing procedure about not writing it too detailed that say if a criminal was doing it, then they would get to know too much about how a policeman or a team would investigate a crime?
No, there's so much information around now. I mean, you only have to watch some of the true crime shows on TV, let alone some of the books that are out there to know. I mean, criminals these days, there's there's so much for them to think about. I mean, I kind of look back and I think, well, how did detectives do their job without phone data and CCTV and all that kind of? Because you think of phone data, CCTV, and DNA. How many crimes are solved by using those three things? It's ridiculous. How did they used to do their job without all that stuff? Same with writers. We have to think now about cameras. Where would a camera be? Where might a camera be? Dash cams, doorbell cameras. It's hard to commit a crime and not be seen these days. So you
Yeah.
have to bear that in mind when you're writing as well. But no, unless you're, the thickest criminals on earth, then you can definitely learn what you need to from watching TV and reading a few books, if you can read.
Yeah. Some of the people I serve at work, it's helpful how they get up and get dressed in the morning and leave the house. I have no idea.
But yeah, I think if you get caught these days, then there's something wrong with you.
Yeah, indeed. Well, watching 24 hours in police custody.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a good example. I mean, you know what they look at. So if you're not avoiding that kind of stuff, but then, most crimes are committed spur of the moment, or they're not hugely well planned. Organized crime obviously is, and they're the toughest ones to get and prosecute. But ordinary crime is pretty much done. Someone's going to see it. Someone's going to film it. So yeah, I don't worry about the criminal side. I just worry about me getting it right.
A question that I asked at Brighton that you missed out on because you weren't well was how do you feel about reflecting the political feeling of the public when you're writing or being careful not to upset? you know, to include? Do you include the reality, or do you try and avoid it?
Um, well, I think when you're writing about crime, you invariably rub up against what's going on in society. So, I've touched upon things like I said, there's cuckooing, the drugs trade, um, there are obviously people trafficking and all that kind of stuff. If you're writing about it, you have to write about it in a balanced and fair way from both perspectives. But I don't try to inject my opinions. That's the thing I'm very careful not to do. Um, you try and get it as balanced as possible. You try and do as much research as possible, so that you're telling a story that's believable, and you're telling a story that's people can look at and say, yeah, that's a fair reflection of what's going on. Um, I think you can veer towards personalizing it too much, and I'm very careful about steering clear of that. In fact, there was a post in one of the book groups the other day about people politicizing their work too much. Um, I'm hugely against that, because someone went on there and said, "Oh, writers have a voice. That's down to them to sort of say these things." And I think the opposite. So what? I've got a voice. It doesn't mean to say I should use it. It doesn't mean to say what I'm saying is worth any more than anybody else. We're just normal human beings who happen to write for a living. My opinion is not worth more than anybody else's. So I don't inject that side. I inject a huge amount of other things personal to me that people won't know particularly are personal to me. They go into the book. But no, politics, society in general, I don't go in for, I'm aware of all the things that people look at now, tolerance, inclusivity, and all that kind of thing. What I strive for again is to offer what I think is the right thing for my story and my book. And that's as far as I'm going to go. People either like it or they don't.
Yeah, I think that's the right way. Although Alex Scarrow writes, puts little bits of politics in his, but I don't think it's excessive. And it does get commented on, but I just brush over it because it's his opinion and that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to name names, but there is a series that's quite well received that does have a bit more politics in it than I would like, and it's put me off reading it. And it's why I've never included that. I kind of had one book where I brushed up against politics on one occasion, in terms of kind of far right and its opposite. Um, but I didn't dwell on those things. They were only in as far as they needed to be in it, and then I was out of it again. I mean, I'm not here to preach to people. I tell a story. I hope to entertain, and at the end of the day, that's what I produce. And as I say, people like it or they don't like it, and I can debate with people. I'm happy to debate stuff with people. Um, I don't mind criticism, frankly, as long as it's well thought out criticism. But I think when you try and personalize stuff or politicize stuff, I think that's where you can run afoul of readers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's such a hot subject anyway, isn't it? So
It is.
best of luck.
Yeah, I mean, people used to say you don't talk about politics or religion, and yeah, I don't write about them either.
Yeah, I don't think that's ever been true either. So. Another thing that I wanted to ask you was you included depression, which was quite interesting, especially males.
Mm.
Was that a really conscious thing to make a point of?
I- I'd been I'd been thinking about it for a while in terms of the kind of stress and strains that police officers are put under, the things that they see, the things that they encounter on a regular basis, and you know how that affects people. So yeah, it was a deliberate thought, and then I read a book um, by an ex police officer, and I read about the depression they went through, and they ended up being quite senior, well, very senior. Um, but they went through a very severe depression after a really particular nasty incident. Um, and I'm also aware of it from watching, again, sort of cop shows on TV where some people are openly discussing incidents that they've been involved in and how it affected them afterwards. Excuse me. So, yeah, I thought, I'm not going to shy away from it. This is my 11th book. I've not really touched upon it. I inject the light side of things. Um, but for the sake of reality, I'm going to write about it. And so that's why I did it. And it might surprise some readers, the particular individual that I chose. But I've kind of felt that made it even kind of not prescient, but it kind of made people think, okay, well, is that the kind of thing they really go through? Again, police officers are just human beings.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was, I mean, I've told you and I'm open about the fact that I struggle. So it was nice to see as well, and nice that, I mean, men's mental health in particular is so not talked about, and male suicide statistics are horrific and stuff. So it was really, really, I was really pleased to see it.
Well, yeah, it's something that you could get wrong very easily. So I kind of reread certain parts of the book I mentioned, and I thought about it quite deeply about how far to go with it. And I didn't go as far as I could have done, but I went just as far as I needed to kind of explain why somebody would, perhaps become depressed. And it's not one thing, it's usually a culmination of several incidents that eventually gets to them. And often it goes back to something fairly traumatic, which it did in this case. There was a spark that was so traumatic that they might never have recovered from it. So yeah, it's the kind of thing that it's a hot topic. I didn't choose it because it's a hot topic. I just felt that it was right for this book at that time, and that it wasn't to send a message out in particular, although some people have said that it's a good message to portray. But it was done simply because I felt I should, and at that particular point, it just came up, and I thought this is the ideal moment to introduce it. And also, just to offer another insight into another character, really.
Yeah, that's what I mean. You say about the level, I think you nailed it. You didn't need to write, you didn't need to delve deeper, it was perfect. And also the thing that I love is, they're your bliss bits, but they're not really, we know all the characters just as
Mm.
well, really, as we do bliss. So that's one of the things I think, I mean, I love, but I imagine everyone else loves as well. So yeah.
Well, I think people do, and I have to say that that's something I've learned as I've gone along. And I have to give sort of credit to Angie Marsons because I read a couple of her books and I noted how much she um, focused on the team. And when I started, I felt that was going to be unwieldy because the team can be quite large. Um, so I thought, well, I'm going to keep it down to kind of 6 to 8 main characters, six in the main, two above them, and narrow my focus. Other people will come and go. They'll appear on the page here and there when they need to, but I'll focus on these characters. And bit by bit, I'll draw more out of them. I mean, one or two have gone, one or two have come in, as would happen in any workplace. So that's a natural flow as well. And I was talking to Morgan Green, and I was saying we were saying about the difference between a series and standalones. And I said, for me, it's kind of 50-50, the pros and cons, because on the comfort side of a series, you have the characters that you know. You obviously have to introduce new ones as part of the storyline, but you have your familiar. But that also poses a problem in keeping it fresh. So you have obviously your storyline. Hopefully, that's going to change significantly enough every time that that's fresh. But also your procedure, you've got to keep that fresh. You have to include things, but you can include them in different measures every time. But character development is one of the things that I particularly focused on throughout the series, and giving people a little bit more time on the page so that readers can become more familiar with them. I don't go fully into their background stories, but I give people enough of an insight, hopefully, that they warm to more than just Bliss and Chandler.
Yeah, and Molly this time, obviously, which was awesome. It was great to learn more about her, and the interactions between her and Bliss were brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those things that happens that you just can't plan for, you know. When I wrote Endless Silence Scream, I had no idea when I wrote the first scene where Molly's about to kill herself that she would ever appear again. But just writing that first chapter, I knew that I would feature her a bit more. And then the more I wrote about her, the more I wanted to feature her. So that book changed out of all recognition because of that character. It was always the focus was always going to start with that character because I'd seen a news story on TV, our local news, about a drugs mule, and it was a young girl. And I thought that might be a nice angle to sort of approach the beginning of the story from and to focus. But my focus shifted from the drugs trade in general and drug mules in general to this one specific character. And so the book changed from that point of view. And yeah, I've loved bringing her back in every now and then. And yeah, she's one of my favorite characters that I've created. And I probably would like to have had her involved in a little bit more, but it's not feasible to have her involved any more than she has been. Although, there's an interesting part in the new book that suggests, she might pop up a little bit more in the future. I can't say too much about it, but there are indicators that that might happen. But I love those scenes with her. I think one of the reasons is it reminds me of my relationship with my own daughter.
Yeah, I can so picture you.
Yeah. I mean, the banter between them and the absolute disregard for the other one's feelings when they're having a pop at each other. That's me and my daughter. So yeah, that's where I derive a lot of that from.
I mean, have you noticed that Bliss and you are like less different the more the books go on?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think as I said before, my wife notices it more than I do. You know, she'll read a book and she'll go, "Oh, that's so you," you know, "Oh, that's so you." That is, So yeah, I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. Depends what point it's at. I tend to think I've probably got all of his worst characteristics and none of his good ones.
It's so funny. I'm just like, even I think I know you fairly well, and I'm reading, I'm just like, yeah, that's so Tony. It's like it's just the same person now.
Yeah, I think we've morphed into one. I don't really know which is which at any given time.
It's so funny. You're not the only one coughing.
Yeah,
I have been talking at work for 9 hours, so
right. Yeah.
just to get a little sympathy and shouting at the kids, as you do.
As you do.
Yeah, I do it anyway quite frequently because why not? It amuses me. I did make a guy blush yesterday because I said I wanted his jumper. It kind of came out before I thought about what I'd said, and afterwards I was like, "Oh well."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can't rewrite history, can you?
No,
Or can you?
fuck it, who cares anyway? I probably won't ever see him again now. Full
No.
socks. Terrified. God, we're both terrible.
I know.
I blame you. I wasn't cooking until I spoke to you.
I've transmitted it through the ether.
Yeah, thanks for that. Are there any sort of crimes that you won't cover or any storylines? Like, because obviously there's so many different, well, I mean, it sort of narrows down to, murder and
Mm.
whatever, but is there anything that you particularly wouldn't like to because you wouldn't want to search?
Well, I mean, I've covered some pretty despicable crimes. I think I don't. Obviously, there are specifics that can be worse, but as you know, I tend to cover some bad crimes, but I don't do so graphically. Um, so I think I don't think there's anything I'd shy away from. I mean, I know the really bad one is animal cruelty. That's ingrained in everybody's head now. You can get away with the odd bit, but you can't focus on it because people just won't read that. I mean, they'd far rather you chop up a dozen people than tread on one cat. So it's that's just the way things are, and so you steer away from that. But no, I mean, I've covered some horrible topics. This last one, and the cuckooing and what happened to the young disabled girl, handicapped girl. I don't know what the word is these days. I think disabled is the word. But yeah, that was not brutal, but it was awful. Um, but yeah, I, I think you can obviously steer away from certain things, and I've not. There are some things I've not written an awful lot about, but by the same token, I think you can cover the topic without necessarily being too graphical about it. Um, and I've tried to do that in all my writing. So no, I don't think there's anything I'd shy away from because the I think the one true thing is that um, the fact is far worse than fiction.
Yeah, I think we've seen that the last 2 years, haven't we?
Yeah.
Um, you're obviously self-published now, and with the way the publishing industry is, do you think that gives you more freedom to write what you want? You said about sort of including depression because
Mm.
it's one of the most discussed things, but do you think maybe it means that you don't have to suddenly start including maybe like trans people and stuff like that because that's what publishing expects now?
Oh, I think the publishing world has just gone along the route that society has gone in general. Um, whether it's a good or bad thing, but certain things are being dictated at the moment. And there are certain things that would not get past an agent's door, let alone a publisher's. Um, I mean, the whole publishing versus self-published thing is something I don't really dwell upon now. I did at one point because obviously it was a choice for me. Um, and there were certain expectations I had. And if I were 20, 30 years younger, I might have a different, long-term plan in mind. But the fact is that I get a huge amount more freedom than I would if I were published. Um, I don't know that I would have got where I got to without being published, but my first 8 books were through a publisher. Um, my last 10 um, have been through me. And there hasn't been any decline in terms of sales or popularity or anything like that. And in fact, things have improved. Um, that's not to say they couldn't have improved more had I gone with another publisher or something like that. But you know, I'm too long in the tooth to put up with a lot of things. And there were a lot of things going on. And, you know, in particular, when I was asked to write a new series and leave Bliss to one side, that was at a point where I felt I really hadn't done justice to the character yet, which was my main reason for leaving. There were other reasons, but that was the main one. So I don't regret that, but I think I would possibly struggle to find, I'd certainly struggle to find a mainstream publisher. Whether that's the quality of the work or not, I don't know, but I would refuse to include something I didn't want to include, and it's that simple. You know, I write books because I enjoy writing. You know, as I've said to other people, I write because I can't not write. The choice I have is whether to publish or not whether I write. I will always write. When I stop publishing is, you know, that will come along and that will be my choice as well. But it is my choice. You know, being able to choose when I write, what I write, when to publish, at what price, all that kind of stuff. You have to take all that on as extra work. You have to take on covered, you know, getting people to do the covers and typesetting, editing, all that kind of stuff. But that's fine. It's just on, you know, it's just work. At the end of the day, the choices are mine now, and you live or die by that. But no, I think it'd be a bit of a struggle now. I don't think me and the publishing world would get on well together. So yeah, you know, I haven't made the big time, but then I never expected to. You know, I've reached a certain level, which, you know, we'd all like more readers, we'd all like more sales. I've reached a level I never imagined I'd reach. I couldn't have imagined being in this position, you know, 6, 7 years ago. So, you know, I'm happy with my lot. You know, all I do now is still strive to write the best book I can at the time. And I write it for me, and there's no publisher or agent looking over my shoulder and saying, well, can't include that, or you should include that. So, no, I'm happy where I am.
I have to ask you as well, which is a hot topic at the minute, is AI. And obviously, because you've had an experience in IT, what's your thoughts on the use of AI? I mean, I think that there's a point where it's being taken too far, because we've used it to some extent with spell check and things. You know, it's existed for years.
All I can say about AI is, has nobody ever seen the Terminator films? Now, come on, because, you know, that's where we're going. No, seriously, AI has its place. AI is not fundamentally a bad thing. It's what you do with it. And of course, it's being exploited. Like every other good thing that comes along, it gets exploited. And AI has been exploited. I mean, no, in my view, no book should ever be written by AI. I would never use AI. I would never buy a book that was written by artificial intelligence. Even people say, oh, well, what about cover design? Well, that does somebody out of a job. You know, of course, if you do your own covers, I mean, I don't, but if I did my own covers, then using AI is not a stretch, because you're not doing anyone out of work. But I use a cover designer to suddenly switch to AI. You know, yes, it might give me a nice cover, you know, more cheaply, but someone else gets done out of their job, and it's a creative thing. The whole thing is a creative thing. And if you remove the creative element, what are you left with? I mean, I think most of us have seen the crude attempts of AI to write something, and it is crude. But a lot of people are dismissive of it because of its crude. But AI learns, and it will continue to learn, and it will continue to correct its own mistakes. And eventually, the more information that's fed in to say, X, Y, and Z is not the way to go, um, eventually it will develop and it will produce something that you probably won't be able to tell any different. Fortunately, someone like Amazon, there's a tick box to say whether you actually have included any AI in your work. And even when you make changes, you have to still retick that box, which I think is a good thing. Of course, you can lie.
Yeah.
And I don't know how good the algorithms are in checking AI. If it's Amazon, it's probably their algorithms are shite. But no, I think it's a dreadful thing to include in something that should be expressive and artistic and human. And I think that's what it will always miss out on, the humanity.
Yeah, that's what I've heard a lot is that because it's artistic, then you'll never ever be able to completely replace someone's own thoughts and feelings onto a page. Which I hope is the case, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what kind of a world it'll be when there are no authors anymore, no artists anymore, because everything's done, you know,
Well, the
on
pandemic showed
computers.
us that we need them as much as anyone as anything. So
Well, the problem is that if you look at music, for instance, now that's ahead of the game, way ahead of the literary world in terms of using AI. And not so long ago, there was some music put out that nobody knew was actually an AI thing. Now I go back to a time when music was written and performed and sung by people who would actually do those jobs. I mean, it depressed me when people started producing music on a computer, but at least they had to do something to it. Now, the thought of an AI just producing something based on all the music that's gone before, I just think, no, that's, I won't ever live in that world when we get there. I'll be long gone. But yeah, I think ahead, and I think that's not a future I want to be part of. Plus the Terminator.
yeah, I'm totally with you with the music thing though. I just happened to be listening to the radio because it was on in my car on the way home on a Sunday with the charts. My goodness. I don't care if it makes me sound old. What the hell? It was just noise. It was awful. Like, no, thank you. And they cut off the Beatles. Made the Beatles sound shorter to put on this noise. Like, oh, unacceptable.
Yeah, I'm a little bit of a dinosaur when it comes to music. I still, for me, it's still about creativity and ability, the ability to sing, the ability to play a musical instrument, and all the hard work that goes into both of those things. I think they're vastly overlooked.
See, people take the piss because I like Ed Sheeran, but Ed Sheeran writes his own songs and he plays the guitar. Yeah, he uses his pedal thing, but generally he's a genuine musician. So why is he criticised when you've got these people using computers making noise? When
Well, the
that,
difference is, I think, with him is that whilst he obviously got creative ability, the label that he has is bland. Um, but as you say, musicians are musicians, singers are singers, and whatever they do should be appreciated compared to what a computer produces. But the advent of things like auto tune, you don't know what you're hearing these days.
no,
And the one way you normally find out is when people try and sing live. But even then, they use auto tune because auto tune has been so finely tuned that by the time that voice emerges from the speaker, it's been tweaked. And you can hear it an awful lot of times. You can hear it. you can hear something unnatural, and that always sells. For me, that shows who's got the ability and who hasn't.
Yeah, very sad. I think many people do
We
that.
shouldn't get started on music and me.
Um, a nice questions. I've asked you some thoughtful questions today. Uh, what's been the biggest pinch me moment of your whole author career?
Mm. There have been a few. I think the one that will stay with me first and foremost is when I went into this, the one thing that was in my mind was, wouldn't it be fantastic to walk into a bookshop and see my book on the shelf? Because I'd done that so many times in my life, the thought of walking in and seeing mine. So the first time I walked into Waterstones in Peterborough, where I lived at the time, saw my books on the shelf. That was a pinch me moment, And I just, first of all, I'm on the normal shelves, and then there's these other ones, these tables that they have. Here's crime books, and there I am amongst all these authors that I read, and so it was quite surreal. But it was that for me has stood out ever since. That's still probably the biggest moment I've had, because it was the one thing I thought of. I didn't think about fame or fortune. It was seeing my book on the shelf. But also, I suppose, the link with readers, which has become so much more than just readers, so many of them. There's also sometimes comparisons can flatter you too much. You can't help but like being compared to some of the people, your own heroes. When that happens, that's always a little bit of a gobsmacking moment. So that's a really, it's a bit arbitrary sometimes, and it's subjective, but you kind of think, yeah, I'll take that. That's a nice thing to read. So those moments are great, but yeah, the bookshelf thing for me.
That's what I want. That's my dream
Mm.
too.
Mm. I think it's where we all begin, and then for some people, things take off beyond that, and your expectations change, your dreams change, your ambitions change. But yeah, that's the moment that'll always stay in my mind.
I think that's a nice place to leave it. Unless there's anything you think that I haven't asked you that you wanted to talk about.
Uh, I don't think so. No, I think that's been quite nice. You weren't horrible.
Yeah. Would you like to remind everyone where they can buy your books from and where they can find out more about you, David?
Well, I mean, obviously, there's my website. I think it's tonyjforder.com. I can't remember off the top of my head. Obviously, Amazon, because that's my sole source of books. That's where I'm married to at the moment, I guess. But I want to say, in case anyone sees this tonight or tomorrow, whenever they see it in the next week, that I have an offer on starting tomorrow. So this book, I don't know if is that backwards, or can you see that normally?
Nice
Right.
one.
So this one is tomorrow for the next 7 days, reduced to 99p. Not the paperback, the ebook. I also have the box sets. The first box set is reduced and the second box set is reduced, so that you can now get all 11 Bliss books for a tenner. So that starts from tomorrow. I will be promoting that first thing in the morning. And yeah, that's my sort of pre-Christmas offer. Yeah, check out the website though, because I've had it redesigned recently. And yeah,
Very impressive.
it looks rather swish.
That's very, yeah, very snazzy.
Not that many people go to websites these days. It's a bit of an old-fashioned thing now to have a website, but it's still, it's still the central source of information. So
Yeah, and you actually update it, which a lot of authors don't. So that's also a tip.
Yeah, I need to update it with some interviews as well soon. So.
Yeah. Well, you're a popular guy, what can I say?
Yeah. But no, thank you very much for having me on. I know it's been very delayed. You know, my book's been out 2 months now, but obviously I was ill and then I got COVID. So I was ill again. I'm not in the hugely in the best of health now, but it's improving. So, but a drop of the black stuff really helps. Yeah, keeps the throat well oiled, keeps me well oiled. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure as usual. And yeah, I look forward to seeing it at some point.
Yeah.